Hello, I'm Alec Hogg, and sorry, we're a couple of minutes late, just getting the last minute technology sorted out. We're going to be talking about the Kisby Fund today. Lovely to see so much interest in this extraordinary innovation. And as you'll be finding out from our panelists in just a little while, remember that this is an interactive webinar. And before we kick off, our General Manager, Stuart Lohman, Stu, come on, put your camera on for a second, is going to take us through the questions or how you post questions, and just to make sure that everybody's actually understanding or hearing us loud and clear. Stu? Stuart. I think that Stuart is in a conversation with.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get hold of Mark.
Two things. You need to make me a panelist, please, because I can't show my screen. And secondly, do you just want to allow or explain to everybody how how it all works? Okay, brilliant. Now I'm the presenter, so everything is going good. Let's just
I'll run through the housekeeping so long, and while you sort that out. Sorry about this all. We've done this for 5 years, and unfortunately we've just had a bit of a little slow start, but we'll get there. As we like to keep them very conversational, you'll see a little questions bar on the control panel on the right-hand side. Please put your questions through there, and then Alec can pass them on to the panelists as we go through. And then just to check the sound and video, if you can see Alec on screen now and hear my voice, there's a little high five option on your panel, control panel as well. If I've got some high fives coming through, Alex, so that's great. Cool. If there's any problem with the sound, just let us know in the questions bar as well. But Alec, all good your side, and I'll try to get hold of Mark now quick. Good luck.
Brilliant. All right, so we do have Warren Wheatley and Sean Emery, both with communications. Gents, if you could switch on your cameras so we can see you as well.
Alec, my sound is working for now. But I'm still struggling to get my camera on. But I'll take any questions or discussions. I'm not that great to look at anyway, so it's probably better. But as soon as I figure it out, I'll get there.
Are you suggesting that those that you are going to be seeing on screen are better to look at? Don't think so. Don't think so. Anyway, we'll move on a little later. There's Sean. Just to set a little bit of the background to what we're going to be talking about today, the Kisby Fund, as I wrote in the newsletter this morning, is named after the life belt. Now, I know, Warren, you've been instrumental in this for a long time. Where did you find this name, or where did the name come from?
The name is actually from a British naval officer named Thomas Kisby, who actually invented the life ring, and it's more people lent themselves to using life buoy, but he was the actual inventor of the device. So it's named after British naval officer Thomas Kisby.
But the decision to name this fund the Kisby, where did that come?
Well, we thought that the analogy of trying to save somebody was apt. The Lifebuoy name was taken by a soap brand, unfortunately, and so we found the next best thing, one of the synonyms for the Lifebuoy.
Well, we can see Mark. We can't quite hear him yet, but I'm sure we're going to get that in just a moment. I'm just going to take his webcam away for the moment. Sean Emery, you've been involved in a lot of the... Mark, can you hear us now?
I've always been able to hear you. The question is, can you hear me?
You're 100%. We can see you. We can hear you. So everything...
You can hear me. I've never had so much fun in my life. There we go. Okay.
Well, Warren's still battling with his webcam. So it's going to take... the two of you to tell us a little more about.
Good morning, everybody.
It's a little embarrassing that the youngest is having the most trouble with the technology, but anyway, let me see what I can get done.
No worries. Well, we've got lots of people on the webinar. As Stuart was saying a little earlier, there is a question box. So if you'd like to communicate with our panelists, just click on the question box there, type it in, and away we go. Mark, last time most people heard of you or from you, you were running the post office. Now, there were some interesting developments on that side, which we're not going to get into now, but you could have done pretty much anything you wanted to after that, and yet you've chosen to get involved with the Kisby SME Fund. What was the appeal? What attracted you?
Well, thanks, Alex, and thanks for having us here. First, one of the reasons I went to the post office was I saw it as having the reach and infrastructure to get out into the marketplace. And my personal mission for the last decade, I guess, has been that, I'm trying to find the middle so that we don't, for the rest of our lives, live in this tension of economic inequality, and so that we can have a peaceful economic coexistence with some prospect of economic dignity. Now, an SME-focused fund such as Kisby Fund is, particularly given its very different elements of design, I believe is the first properly considered vehicle that is going to get us into SMEs and finance them at an appropriate capital mix at an appropriate price. So to me, that's very exciting, and it's a mission that I've held close to my heart for some time, and I think we've got the elements of design right here.
Sean Emery is also on screen. Now, Sean, what's your involvement here? We know Mark's the chairman and the whip cracker, I guess. So what's your role?
Mark needs somebody to do most of the things, right? I mean, I think he always says he's the captain, and he needs people.
I don't work, Alec.
So Mark tells people what to do, and we do what he says we have to do. That's how he likes to operate.
But you've been involved in putting together tech, really good, strong tech for a couple of decades now. Our paths have crossed a few times, given that we have been working in the online area in parallel ways. Is that the secret to all of this, that people can use tech to borrow more cheaply than they'd have to borrow elsewhere, and that the investors would get a better return? Is that kind of the story?
So, Alec, I've been doing tech for a long time, as you know, and really focused on SME and SME lending and all the SME innovation, crowdfunding, breaking it down. But what I've learned in that period of time is that it's not technology. It's about financial innovation. And I spent my life trying to invent technology and make technology better. But if you haven't got the core financial structure right, in other words, the ability to price a loan at the right price and make sure there's no defaults, and actually to reinvent a little bit of how you as a fund make money so that you can give money cheaper. That's an important element. So Mark's come along with a lot of financial engineering in the fund in the way that the product is given to the small business. And that's what's been missing for me. I mean, we've been around private equity and around crowdfunding. And yes, of course, the fact that we can use technology to make our operations efficient helps us to reduce the cost. And we can pass that cost on to the SMEs to not overburden them with cost of doing business with us. But fundamentally, the secret sauce in this product is not only its tech, it's actually the design of the products which we're putting out there.
Perhaps I can talk to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, tech has got a very enduring characteristic, which is that it's objective. Okay, so when you, as part of it's consistent and objective. Okay, so when you have within the filter system that you're using a piece of technology which can sort and sift and filter information, that's a vital piece because it behaves predictably and it's objective in what it spits out, given what it takes in. So that capacity is an extraordinarily important part of the Kisby complexity. But the real issue is this, in my view. So where people have try to fund small businesses is only with debt. Okay. So now, unfortunately, the lenders never get invited to the dinner. They just pay for the food. Okay. And the lenders never come to the party. So for a lender, your life consists of putting money at risk and either getting it back or not getting it back. Okay. The people that you get it back from wave you goodbye and go off into the distance and become Facebook or you know, Naspers or whatever it is that they become. And so you do not participate in the upside as the debt providers. Now, debt providers have to kiss a lot of frogs before they find a princess. And every time they go into a particular sector and it doesn't work, which is characteristic of innovative and new businesses, is that a lot of them just don't work the first time around. People learn, change. And so they go in there, they lend a piece of money, that money doesn't come back. They go in there, lend another piece of money. Every time they do that, the risk profile changes and the cost of that money changes. And if the only return you can get as a lender is either a bad debt or a reasonable margin, you're not going to stay in business if you're in the growth asset companies, okay? Because that's not the binary outcome that you can expect. So what you need to bring to such a part, so in the end result, they price for default a lot because that's what they experience, okay? And so the cost of that capital goes up and up and up until eventually they're lending money at 40% and above, which is usurious and destroys the very assets they're seeking to fund the growth of. What you need is a mixture of equity risk capital and secured debt capital, so that you can sit there and look at the maturity growth profile of the company, and you can say, okay, and you'll see in the Kisby Fund that we've got different instruments. One of them is a CPI-based instrument which has conversion rights attached to it. So that's a low servicing instrument which needs low cash flow, which is typical of the initial stages of growth of an SME company. But we've got equity rights attached to that, so that can convert into equity, or we can defer but receive an equity-related return. I think our target return would be.
Mark, you're getting into a lot of detail here. So I think when we get questions, specific questions, we'll get into that. But I want to introduce Warren. He's been sitting on the background there. He hasn't got his camera, but we can see what he looks like because thanks to the beauty of technology. There you are on the screen, Warren. Just from your perspective, do you want to tell us how you got involved in this and what your interest is in the Kisby Fund? And I'm seeing your microphone's off, Warren, so I hope we haven't lost you.
You see, Alex, I was talking a lot. I was talking sense, man.
Yes.
You see?
All my fault. All my fault. Okay, so let's just go into the real basic stuff, because I'm sure of the people who are listening.
Let me try and say that all in 3 sentences.
They want to borrow, yeah.
Let me say that all in 3 sentences. Mm-hmm. The capacity for borrowing money in a growing business is limited because you haven't yet matured your cash flow income to service it. Okay? So you need a partner that will help you through the growth stage with appropriate capital that doesn't require immediate servicing. And for that partner will want a piece of the party at the end. Okay? And so if you're just going to borrow money, you're going to get it at a price which you initially can't afford because you're not prepared to give away, or the people that provide it to you don't want part of who you are. If you get that mix right, you end up in a partnership with a small and medium, with an SME, instead of being a funder. You end up sitting next to them and reasonably often in the beginning going, how does this mix work for you? Should we defer a bit of that, add a bit of this? And they're out there growing without having to sit there every month and going, I've got this massive interest bill, I can't take that risk. And so we're trying to go where banks don't go because they don't like equity risk, and where private equity players don't yet see, they're looking for, much more exciting, much more, obvious builds than we are, which we're looking at ordinary businesses here, ordinary businesses who, but for capital, would be growing much faster.
Okay, so on the screen there, and I think this is really what a lot of people are going to be interested in. Maybe you can explain this. The interest rate now that small businesses are being charged, and actually maybe we should go back one slide. I've got a slide here from your presentation, which tells us exactly what small businesses are. So we're talking here about companies who are up to turnovers of up to 50 million as a medium-sized enterprise. So anybody above that, is that outside of the net, just as a starting point?
No, I think that slide is, that's a piece of a slide,
Yes.
which was looking at sort of general definitions of SMEs. And so so that's not our definition. Our definition is aligned to that, and our definition goes something like this. We would look for companies with a turnover somewhere between upwards of 10 million, with no upper limit. Okay. A. B, we would look to loan sizes, which were typical, or let me say capital funding sizes, which range from about 1 million to say 50 million. I don't think we'd want to go bigger than that. Okay. And we'd look also to the number of employees that this enables or creates, okay, or retains. And so what we're trying to do is look at the ecosystem within which these companies operate, and bearing in mind that every time you retain an employee, the country's got an asset. Every time someone becomes unemployed, the country's got a liability. So we're trying to bring that net together, and I'll talk later perhaps about the support mechanisms other than money. But our target is pretty loosely defined. We want people that behave well, that pay tax, that are registered and compliant with all of those kinds of business functionalities. But our size is a lot more flexible than any definition we've come across.
Brilliant. So anybody from turnover of 10 million upwards, they're in the game as far as you're concerned. Now, maybe Sean, you can talk to this one quickly for us. A lot of these companies are factoring their debt at the moment, or factoring their invoices at the moment. They're paying interest rates. Again, this is from your presentation, Mark, so I hope I haven't got this one wrong as well. But they're paying 25% to 32% interest rates. And then Kisby is looking at an interest rate which is significantly below that, 19.75. Just explain how you can do that.
Thanks, Alex. I think maybe just talk to this point here about what is available for the SMEs at the moment. We've got an interesting situation now with the time for Kisby. We're going to go into a 5-year period where our view is that banks will contract funding because of the way they view the risk that they can't have, our Mark explained. And so whenever you have a contraction of lenders into a market or people pulling back, you get a whole lot of new people coming into the marketplace. And they're going to come in these niche places. We call them micro lenders, or we call them effectively small lenders that are coming to the specific places and taking it on a throwing money out there with very little, obviously due diligence, but not quite as much as you like, but they're getting away with it because they charge a very, very high interest rate and they're servicing an unmet demand. So I don't think that anybody should be looking at credit which costs them 30% a year if you're an SME. A 30% interest rate is very, very difficult to service out of the normal profitability and cash flow of an SME. So when we looked at this 19.75, it's a target that we have. We think that 19.75, this is actually, it's an effective interest rate, but technically it would be called 18. But it's something which people can afford. It's something you can, on a reasonable profitability, a reasonable margin, a reasonable service, you can actually function and grow your business and not pay so much money towards interest that you can't employ more people. So we've got a very specific target around that. If you think about the factoring businesses, they all serve a great purpose. They serve an instant cash flow purpose, but it's very expensive. I saw an advert today offered to our business. We could have our debtors factored at basically a 6% charge of the actual debtor. 6% to get paid now versus in 60 days. If we times that effectively, you're dealing with a significant interest rate. If it's north of 50% that you're paying effectively, if you're on an annualized basis for that money, it's just too expensive. It eats up too much of our margin. So the main aim is to be able to offer it at a rate of this, but clearly from a returns point of view, in order to get this, we've got to have some upside return, which is where Mark talks about participating with companies as they grow as well.
Sean, thanks for that. Mark, I don't understand this because you look absolutely fine to me, but according to literally dozens and dozens of people who are sending through questions, your camera is upside down. Is there any way you can turn your camera the other way around? Let me see if that
hang
works.
on.
I have
Okay,
no
well,
idea how that is.
No, it's not quite true because I know the room that he's in and the walls got paneling on it, so it's not.
my camera's not upside down. That's the roof above me. I've turned the thing around now. But that doesn't help.
Okay, let's just see. Is that working?
To everybody?
It's amazing. I've never heard of this before. Stuart, come on, you the guy with all the tech understanding.
Alec, I've been looking at Mark the right way around the whole 20 minutes, so I'm not sure what's happening on the user side, but it looks fine. I think it might be because it's on an iPad, but otherwise it's fine. I'm not sure. We can see if
perhaps you could encourage those people who are seeing me upside down to only log in once they finish with their yoga class.
Okay. All right. Now we do have Warren with us. Warren, we've been struggling to bring you in. Let's just quickly give a little bit of your involvement in this and why.
So Alec, my involvement is I'm sort of the guy who's been stringing all these disparate parts of the Le Boucher investment group together. It's always been my vision to build unique financial services products. It's always been a problem that we've never had a recognized brand, and using technology and media to get that to service the public. So my job is really just bringing disparate teams together. I guess we are a little desperate as well, but that's been my role, is getting everyone singing off the same hymn sheet and organizing meetings and all that kind of stuff, and just making sure everyone shares the same vision. It's harder sometimes than others, but it's basically been an organizing role and getting all the smart guys into the same room.
Thanks, Warren. Okay, Mark, we're going to have to get your camera right because you are distressing so many people here. Someone, Martin says, he did it right for 3 seconds.
Oh, so I did this. I turned it off. Was that what was right?
Did you turn it around?
I turn it around, Mark, see if it helps.
Just hang on. I'll see what I can do. Yeah, turn it around, and you'll see the desk. Turn it around again. You see me.
Turn your iPad around again for 3 seconds. Maybe that's what they're referring to for 3 seconds.
Okay, but I'll turn my iPad around for a sec like this.
You're an original, Mr. Barnes. I must tell you, we've been doing this for 5 years, and this has never happened to us before. So,
I mean, this thing is that better?
He just say this again. He turned okay, but reverted back to the original upside down. How's that, guys?
Maybe it's this. Maybe this is the way. Does that work?
Still upside down. Better when he turned the camera.
You look fine.
Sorted. Don't touch.
Does that work now?
When it was long ways, it was perfect.
Is this right or not? Is this right? Yes or no?
Hang on, just stay with it. Yes, perfect. Don't touch, please. Everybody. Now correct. Apologies, guys. We're going to go a little bit longer in the webinar because of these technical issues, but we've got it now. Let's get into some of the questions. Apart from telling us about Mark's iPad or that he was in Australia, I mean, you know, the comments that you get, great South Africans. I've been chuckling away looking at this lot here, but perhaps we can. There's just so many questions. Stu, I'd like to just get a little understanding about who's going to fund all of this. Where's the money going to come from? Mark, Sean?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. First of all, you know, the money is not coming from the public. Okay, obviously, we are raising money from savvy institutions like major pension funds or major pools of capital, wise, informed pools of capital, on the basis that they don't actually have access to this asset class. Okay. So as a pension fund, you know, setting Section 28 aside for the time being, most pools of capital have access to listed equities or bonds or loans or whatever, but they don't have access to this particular SME growing small company as an asset class, because they don't have the time to go out there and look for them and filter them as we can do with our various stages of loan approval and investment oversight. And so we are bringing to them the sophisticated mainstream capital players in the country. We're bringing to them an access to an asset class which we've gone out and found.
Kevin Barrett wants to know, is it a brilliant concept? Does the borrower have the option to repay your loan rather than convert the debt to equity? And what are the triggers that determine a conversion?
Okay, so the borrower typically would have a mix. Okay, so the funds ratio we think is going to end up, we target to be 1 part convertibles, 4 parts debt. Okay, so it'll be like a 20% of the funding. And typically most SMEs, after we've had a look at them and looked at their immediate cash flows, we would decide what is an appropriate mix of that capital on the basis that from a portfolio perspective, we'll end up with roughly that ratio, about 20% equity, about 80% debt. Now, we have the right to convert, okay? And obviously that right has got to be at a price which we've got to agree with the SME as we go into it, whether it's a formulaic price or whatever it is. But we might find, okay, that within 6 months of going down this 5-year journey, we've discovered another magic thing. I was going to say Facebook, but they're in so much trouble, I'm not sure I want to mention it. But we've discovered Alibaba, we've discovered whatever we have. At that point in time, it would be crazy for us not to convert into our 20% equity or whatever the formula would tell us, and you know, list the company or whatever it is that we might do. Okay, so there is a, if you like, a continuous conversation about when we should convert into equity. If we don't convert into equity, actually, okay, so we could actually convert into shares at any time during the 5-year, you know, roughly 5-year period that we're anticipating this will happen. If we don't, when we exit from the fund, that piece of funding, we'd look to get a 15% real return on. Okay, and so that'd be very different, but it would have a very low servicing cost. So I think it's going to be serviced at something like 7%, which is CPI plus 2.5% orders of magnitude. And so that's got a low service cost, but you're giving away some of the action. And that is a right of the fund, not a right of the target SME.
Priya Duplessis, a name that you'd recognize, Mark, says it's the 19.75% rate an IRR, i.e. a combination of interest and equity returns? And if so, what are the interest and equity components giving that 19.75%?
So the 19.75 is the senior debt piece. That's the rate on the loan, on the standard debt loan. The blended return, if my memory serves me, depends on what the performance of the equity piece might be. But I think that was the price to the SME of the borrowing.
Sure. Warren, jump in if you'd like to answer.
Yeah, technically, in a normal standardized loan, which Mark described, if you had a vanilla, which I don't think anybody's going to be quite vanilla, you'd have 80% of the loan at your 19.75, and then 20% of your loan would have this option for us to have an equity type return. And there we will be looking at CPI plus a 15% real. So it would end up being higher than 19 on the remaining 20% if we chose to exercise it.
Hans Bolo wants to know, what makes you different from business partners?
Well, it's going to be difficult for me to answer that question because I don't know who they are.
Business partners, the old SBDC.
Oh, okay.
What are they called
I
now?
don't know, because I haven't sort of juxtapositioned them with us. You know, we didn't, Alec, I must be straightforward with you. We didn't go and look at what's out there and try and design something that wasn't. We looked at what was required and designed from that level. So, you know, we sat around and said, what is missing? Why are SMEs not getting money? Why are the industrial little companies in Port Elizabeth not growing? Why are little companies limited to what their parents can guarantee? And why won't the banks go there? And and so we try to do, you know, we try to do what Uber's doing. We try to go to the client instead of asking the client to come to us. And it is our combined assessment that this mixture of capital at a price way below what the usurious plus prices are that people that don't have assets are that we are able to fund it. Let me give you some examples. You know, the definition of bankability has got to change. Now, let's assume that you're in Soweto and you're renting out 3 rooms at 400 Rand a month, and you've been doing that for 10 years, but you don't own the property. Why can't we lend you money? Okay, they've knocked me out of this thing now.
I have, Mark. I've just taken you because unfortunately you're still upside down. So it's making a lot of people real irritated. And let's rather just, I've got lots of slides here. We can just keep talking and just talk to the slides rather than having the camera at this point.
Okay, well, I don't know what to do about it. Maybe I can try one more time to put my thing
Don't worry, Mark. Seriously, don't worry about it. Let's just focus on the issues. On the screen now, you should see the slide which talks about loan support for SME borrowers, and perhaps you can just break that down to exactly what it is that people need and to give you if they want to participate.
Okay, I've lost the screen completely, so let me try and find it now. Okay, you're closing out. Okay, ask the question again, please. Sorry. Yeah.
Now, I've got on the screen here loan support for SME borrowers. There's basically 2 sides to this whole Kisby project.
Okay,
the one is the
let me
note
talk to
loans.
the senior notes. So the senior notes is a fully amortizing loan, and we typically think that's going to be between 12 and 36 months. And the size of that loan, I mean, those things I think are all self-explanatory. That loan needs to be serviced and amortized over its life. Okay, so that is what the company can bear in terms of what I might describe as traditional loan finance. Then we have what we call impact capital. That's got a much lower interest rate and potentially a longer term. The interest rate there is CPI plus 2.5%. No one would lend you money at that rate unless they had a piece of the equity. Okay, so that particular instrument has got conversion rights into equity at an agreed formulaically driven price. Okay, at any point in time during the term of this relationship. Okay, or if we don't convert into equity, that loan, that impact capital, has to be redeemed to yield to us a 15% real return. Okay, so that they can then, if you like to look at it mechanically, at the end of this period, at 5 years' time, they can have a rights issue, or they can list on the stock market, or they can find someone to buy a stake in their business and use that cash to redeem that capital at what will yield to us a 15% real IRR. Unless we've converted into equity along the way, in which case we can then just sell the equity to that investor.
Dina Chetty says the model calls for tracking on a regular basis the overall performance of the invested company. If that is so, how do you go about this?
Maybe Sean can talk a bit about that.
Sean?
Yeah, Alec, this has been something we're doing. I mean, we're doing it. The short answer is we use technology to do it. When we get a portfolio of this size, it's effectively integrated aspects to degrees of the accounting. You want to share my screen? I thought you just turned me off because I was looking a bit, glowing in your light.
You're the best looking guy.
Yeah, so we have this. The short answer is yes, we have to monitor them, and that's what I've been building for the last 5 years, is various technology elements to monitor that. Whether it's the PAYE returns, whether it's people submitting to us their accounts, whether it's their bank account details. We have a number of ways to ultimately to be engaged with the borrower. However, of course, when it comes to the larger ones, which Mark was talking about, there will, of course, need to be your normal private equity type sit-downs, meeting with the people and going through it as well for the impact capital portion. Just a point on the screen. Although this is the target 80-20, a particular company may be more suited to a 50-50 split, or so the splits per company may vary, but the overall fund looks for an 80-20 split.
Dina had a follow-up, and that is, if you take a typical debt equity loan, what would be the overall cost of capital over a period of 5 years?
So I think there's 2 points. I can address it as well. Is that I can think Mark tried to address it early on. In order for us to be able to model this, you want to find businesses where you convert your equity earlier on than the 5 years and perhaps even hold it. So this is the combination of a debt fund and an equity fund effectively brought together in what is in the structure. So the cost to someone is our risk, right? So it may end up costing significantly if that equity turns out to be worth 200 or 300 million and the guy only borrowed some. So depending on the growth, the company succeeds. So it's not an exact science that makes sense, Alec, when I'm talking to you. It's effectively a note, a loan combined with a degree of equity. And because we are going to be able to make equity upside, we can afford to use that equity upside to subsidize effectively this cheaper loan of the senior notes ultimately in the base, which will have relatively, in our mind, we will still have defaults in this SME sector. So in order to not push the interest rates up and keep these interest rates low, we need to have an upside blue sky effectively in some of these equity instruments that we take.
Thanks, Sean. I'll stop your camera now. Derek Christian says, and I've put this slide back up here for you, Mark, that the costs still look very high, the interest rate cost of 19.75.
Well, compared to what? You see, they look very high if you're an established business where you're borrowing money from the bank at prime +2. But you're not an established business borrowing from the banks at prime +2. You're a bank, you're a small business crying out for funding and not able to get it. And we think this prices in the appropriate expected bad loan, losses, and it prices in the sort of yield that we'd have to promise to the institutions from whom we're going to get the capital. We're offering them a prime +2 yield. And so, we think it is significantly below the lowest interest rate that SME loans are being serviced at the moment. So, yeah, I mean, you might think it's high, but it's cheaper than anything else.
Yeah, go and try factoring.
This is an average, so some people will, of course, qualify for less, and some may be slightly more, but we aim to have a cap of at least this 20%.
Yeah, I mean, the lowest alternative is 25%. That we can find, and so, yeah.
Roy Harrington wants to know, he says, what security do you need to access a loan of R500,000 from Kisby? Is that 19.75% variable based on fluctuating interest rates?
It'll depend on what security you've got, but yes, it's a floating rate. It's linked to prime.
And what security would you need? Let's just say that it's only a R500,000 loan that he's talking about here.
So Alec, I think, can I just jump in there for a second? So what we're trying to do is be significantly less formulaic than the questions that are coming. I mean, a lot of banks would come out with a lot of the online lenders in the past have given you very specific criteria on this. But because we have the equity return, we are looking for the investment committees, are great people on this investment committee, to be able to look through things like the specific minimum security required to have a specific loan of an X. Most people don't have that, so we had to be quite specific in how we can deal with it. That's why we got the investment committee to make the approach. So we don't have a formulaic answer to that question.
Temba Tlengani wants to know, so are new companies with confirmed long-term and profitable contracts excluded? Is there no profitability test instead of history? Sean?
I think those are the kind of
Warren,
maybe I
please
could have a turn. Those are the kind of companies that would lend themselves to the second type of loan, where we take an equity stake if you can convince us of the merits of your business case. So we've left the door wide open for anybody to try and access this capital. But why we've put the unique set of skills around the table is to do just that. Is we want guys who are not just assessing credit. We have guys who are assessing actual equity risk, and that's why there are more private equity experts around the table than guys who worked in the back office of a bank. What we're really doing is taking business risk on you in most cases more than credit risk. in least as far as the impact capital component is concerned.
Warren, could you talk this slide at the moment, the non-financial support for borrowers, because that's where you come in with your arena hat on at the moment. Some of the so we talked about the loans, but actually on top of the loans is going to be a lot more that's offered here, which presumably is going to make those loans more creditworthy.
Yeah. So we've decided when we sat around the table, and to Mark's point earlier, we thought about, you know, what is going wrong in this sector, and is it a problem that is purely solved by throwing cash at it? And the answer is categorically no. These SMEs need more than just cash. They need people that they can text at 12 o'clock at night when they can't sleep. And so we've set up an app that you can do that. So you'll be able to see if your particular mentor is awake at 3 in the morning and can spend 3 minutes talking you through a problem that you need to grapple with at 8 o'clock the next morning. So those are the kind of things that are inaccessible currently to SMEs. From an arena perspective, we're going to make up to 500,000 rands worth of advertising available to these SMEs. So suddenly, the back page of the Sunday Times, which was the preserve of the top 100 companies in the country, will suddenly become accessible to a small, widget manufacturer in the Eastern Cape. They'll be able to reach audiences unheard of before. More importantly, we're going to be setting up a virtual platform or virtual marketplace where these SMEs are going to be encouraged to trade with each other. So it's the concept that, it's the local village. We need everyone to be buying from everyone else and not importing goods from the village next door. So quite simply, if I sell staples and you need staples, we're going to try and encourage you to shop in the virtual marketplace. And we're going to use incentives as opposed to, we're going to use carrots as opposed to sticks to get that, to encourage that behavior. So what we're doing is what they sort of call a credit karma scorecard, where good behavior is rewarded through lower cost of funding, and bad behavior is punished through higher cost of funding. And those things would apply to all the things we consider important in the country. So while we won't be having hard and fast rules, we'll encourage good and bad behavior through metrics that you can access and impact your cost of funding.
Brilliant, Warren.
Sorry, can I feel compelled to add a bit to that, Alec.
Yeah, in a minute, Mark, but there's Benny Langenhoven has found your problem. He says you've got your lock screen on. And if you've got your lock screen on, then the software doesn't actually
okay, where do I unlock the lock screen? I don't know.
Okay, so that I can't help you with. If that's, but anyway, if you can work that one out, I'm sure someone will tell us where to do that. But carry on. You were going to respond to that question.
I wanted to add to what Warren said, and a lot of this thinking has come from him. But you need to get out of that place, to get out of that band. You need to start embracing things like economies of scale, like purchasing power, like access at the unit cost of financial services and legal services and administration and backup and logistics. If we can create what I've called an SME marketplace, okay, if we can create or even outsource or create central business facilitation at a unit cost lower than what you'd get at retail as a small SME, that changes the fundamental economic model of the firm. And I can tell you this is an absolute. In our country, the poorest people and the poorest entities pay the highest cost per unit of consumption. It costs the poorest person more for a minute of airtime or an apple or a cigarette than it costs the rich people, because they can't contract and they can't buy wholesale. Now, if you take our SME community, and let's say we do raise a 5 billion fund, and let's say that there's 5 billion invested in, that starts to create a portfolio of companies that can that can punch way above their weight and start getting the right input price so that they can start making the margins to serve mature capital and graduate out of the small place that they came from into the big place where the money is.
Kevin Barrett asks, what regulations?
I'm going to try and fix my camera now. How do I do this?
Just switch off the lock screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Okay, carry on. Sorry.
What regulations affect the fund? Sean?
Yeah, so there's a host of them. And, you know, we spend our life effectively making sure we understand all these regulations. You know, clearly there's the business of a bank, which we're not, which is structured. We're not raising money from the general public. We will be having a selected accredited institutional investors that will be in the fund. We're not governed by the NCR because we're not lending to companies that are less than R1 million turnover or to independent entities. So effectively we are a normal, I mean, this is effectively a standard SME lender as exists in the marketplace today, funded through institutional and impact investors and operational ordinary shareholdings. Can I just stress one thing for you though, Alec? I know you've got the slide up here, but we're not open. We aren't. I think this particular slide in our presentation was for people who wanted to be part of Warren's, of the support services, not necessarily the borrowers. We're not open for borrower applications yet. There is a place on our website where people can register interest to become borrowers, and we will be talking to them. We plan to only open on the 15th of September for actual borrower applications. So there's a place to register interest and for us to get hold of you when we are open, and that's live on the website at the moment.
So at the moment, you're looking for investors, presumably, if you aren't open for borrowers.
Well, we're not making. We've got our investors that we're talking to directly at the moment in various stages. So this is not necessarily a discussion open to the people on this panel to become investors. If there is someone here who represents institutional investor who is interested, of course we would have a conversation with them. But no, and we are in a process of roadshowing to quite a selective group of pre-targeted investor bases.
All right, so Robin Frew, who you might remember ran a listed company some years ago, says, assuming you end up with 100+ clients, how do you actually provide them with meaningful input as a potential equity partner would? Mark, you want to?
Yeah, I can try and answer that. I'm just still battling with how I'm going to give up on this camera story. Okay.
Give up on it, no problem.
I don't know where I am now. Where am I on your thing? Oh, there. So, you know, I think a lot of this is where you marry technology with wisdom, if you like, and judgment and experience. Okay. And you know, I'll give you an example. You know, when I was still in the post office, we started talking about how we bank the unbanked and how we you know, how we could do this. And in China Post, they'd used technology extensively. So if you're, because they've got a much broader country than we have, and they've got lots and lots of tiny companies. And so if you buy apples in the morning and you sell apples in the afternoon, we can technologically create a bank account that can only buy and sell apples, can't buy Rolexes, can't buy other things. And so there's a technological while you sleep oversight capacity that is technologically competent today to have oversight, you know, across any number of accounts. To give you you know, an example, and so they were able to go to an Apple buyer or an Apple trader and go like, how much you do 100? Could you do 200? They said sure. I said fine, as long as you're only buying apples and only selling apples, we can even sweep your account every day to lower your cost of capital. So technology comes in, you know, from that perspective. And then I think, you know, technology is a useful summary. You know, this monitoring of exposures is not new. You know, non-performing loan graphs, behavioral statistics that derive out of the data. Data is central to what we're doing. Monitoring the ratios, making sure, for instance, that these SMEs can for once now centrally report because they've got the system. Then you're not going there, the guy's picking up his notebook and showing you what he sold yesterday. We're putting this in, you know, that's part of the support function. So I think technology is a big part of the answer, and being able to see live or far more regular reporting than typically you would find from a company where the bank just goes there or the micro lender goes there and lends money and doesn't know what's going on in the business. All they watch is the non-performing loan ratios and the timing of cash flows. We will be able to monitor the business because the application form itself takes us deeply into the data that is the constituent part of the businesses that we're funding.
Rudy Janssen wants to know, will you be focusing on specific industries, or is the fund open to various options?
I can also try and answer that. No, we're not focusing on specific industries, although I would argue that the industries where SMEs don't play. So we're not going to build a big mine or a set of roads or go farming. But we might be funding a supplier to the mines who just doesn't have enough working capital to tender, and I don't want to use that word, to apply for that supply contract. And we might be enabling smaller players into bigger industries. We're not going to do industries that we don't understand, and there's going to be a big piece of filter which says, are you a decent corporate citizen? So we don't want to go into industries which we would regard as unsavory, but we don't have a set of industries that we've sat down and said no to.
What if your turnover at present, this is from Gordon Alexander, is less than 10 million rand due to the state of the economy through much of 29 and now being faced with COVID-19 lockdowns, and one's projections only show 10 million rand turnover in, say, a couple of years' time? Will the Kisby Fund look at this?
So I'll go back to what Sean said. I mean, we won't. The application process is quite thorough and quite technical. So apply, and through 4AX Debt Services, which is an up and running platform that's been in this business for some time. We can go into the history if you like, but that process will spit something out at us, the decision makers. But that's a very rigorous process to start with, okay? And so there might then come out of that a process which says this company's got a history of this turnover, COVID has halved it or whatever, and we would then look at that. I mean, the difference that we've been trying to communicate to everyone here is that there are human beings as well that are married to the technology.
Got it. Monique Martinez's questions actually follows up really well on that. What is the Kisby Fund's link to 4Africa Exchange or 4AX?
Sean, can I give that to you?
Yeah, I'll take it. So the 4AX is where we asked a question earlier, Alec, about the technology and services that I've been building over this time. 4AX Debt Services Company, which is it's a subsidiary of the new stock exchange called 4Africa Exchange. That's a subsidiary business. It's effectively 50% held by 4Africa Exchange, and 49.5 and 50.5 effectively owned by Rainfin. And Rainfin has put all of its technology and other technology into that business, and that is effectively the technology hub and engine that's going to be a services company, not over to Kisby, but to all other funds in South Africa if they should need it. So it's becoming a fully fledged end-to-end debt services company that creates the ability for us to create the debt as being somewhat liquid. It creates the ability to provide a service to us so that we all don't have to go and invest in that platform. So we are, from a technical point of view, Kisby contracts and utilizes the services of 4Africa Exchange.
Mark, Nico Ace has just given the solution on how you fix your lock screen. He says when you swipe down on a tablet, you'll see there's a lock screen or auto rotate. Click on that and it'll change the setting. So pretty simple stuff.
Swipe
Thanks,
down
Sean.
on a tablet, I can't see it. Okay.
Luke Kirsten says, and maybe Warren, you want to pick this one up. He says SMEs often don't have security.
We haven't asked for security, Alec. And that's what we're talking about. In certain cases, we're going to feel that security is going to be an equity bet, in which case we'll ask the SME for a share in the business. In other instances, your good behavior will suffice in respect of security. So what we are going to be asking, and we're going to be looking at each application individually, and where there is compelling reason to do so, we'll take the steps needed to get you to the place you need to be. But there's Our system will obviously have a lot of no's, because we need to have some diligence around who we give cash to, because we are looking for institutional money, which typically means the final beneficial owner of that asset are investors or savers. So we need we need lots of responsible lending, but our answers will most typically be maybe or yes. So where it's a maybe, like, let's look at some other things. Let's look at what other ways you can take away the risk of default. What if you, for example, agreed to only trade within our marketplace? Would that help? Are there other ways we can look at this transaction to make it doable so that you can get some access to capital?
Michael Acott wants to know, how much capital have you raised so far?
I haven't checked the bank account this morning, but we've just launched the fund today. We've had one meeting so far, and this is our first presentation to the public. So the honest answer is nothing yet, but we've got some expressions of interest that Mark, myself, and Sean will be hitting the road quite hard in the next few days.
How much capital do you expect to raise?
Well, I mean,
I think we.
Well, do I take that to Mark? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Mark, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we really don't know. Okay. But the appetite that has been expressed to us from the sort of institutional, we didn't go into this thing not getting a sense of what the appetite would be for it. And we've talked about a 5 billion fund, which would be made up of 1 billion of impact capital investment and 4 billion of debt. I'd be surprised if it's not bigger than that. I mean, you've got to start looking at the spin-off virtues of this. I mean, and I don't want to disclose who we're speaking to and how we're doing it, but I mean, government should have an interest in this, because we're creating tax base. UIF should have an interest in this because we're creating UIF contributions. And so I can go through all the vested parties that have left this economy to its own devices, and by inviting them into the formal economy, there are any number of intersections with established capital who have not gone there, and SMEs who have not been found. And and that message is resonating at the highest level of capital that I've intersected with. And so we really don't know. So to go with Warren, we haven't got any money yet. We've just started this. It's just come together. But we've got a lot of people lined up who want to speak to us about their money.
Sipesetle Makanya asks, in regard to accessibility, how does an SME get funding from Kisby? Nice, simple, practical question.
Sean.
They go to they can go to kisby.com now to register interest, but on the 15th of September, and there'll just be an apply button and they go through the online application process.
All right, so Kisby got...
But just more practically, there'll be an app. It's web-based, so any instrument that can interface with the internet or the web can access the portal.
Would the investor or borrower give the nod to invest, or does the Kisby team decide on behalf of the borrower? In other words, is their preference for certain... yeah, let me just read that again. Would the investor or borrower give the nod to invest, or does the Kisby team decide on behalf of the borrower? This is from John Piercy.
The Kisby Fund makes the decision. I mean, the simple answer is we make the decision. We convince investors of our credibility, of our judgment capability, and of the systemic approach that we have to this, and they invest within a mandate. I mean, obviously we have a mandate with them, but we don't revert to them for every credit decision. We operate within a given mandate, which will have its boundaries and limits and areas of no-go perhaps. That might be the case for individual investors. I mean, for institutional investors. But ultimately, the investment committee of the fund makes those decisions.
So Richard Beer wants to know, will sole traders qualify?
No, technically, unfortunately not. Sole traders are outside of the lending. They fall under the lending mandate of the NCR, and we're not lending to people that are in that mandate. So they'll have to just register as a CC to be able to have funding. I mean, sorry, as a PTY, yeah.
As a PTY. Edward Newlebendi wants to know, will you be able to fund SMEs operating in townships, and what kind of security would you be looking at? I think Warren's answered the security question, but would you look at SMEs operating in townships?
Alec, that would be our preference, to lend to the township economy. These are the guys, but not only townships, we're using our media reach to make sure that as many of the informal economy participants can access this capital. And that talks to rural Eastern Cape, the townships and locations across the country. Mark keeps saying, what's a better spend, to take R1 billion and pump it into a state-owned entity, or to take that billion and start 1,000 township businesses. So that's the approach we take in, is to get to the guy you can't access traditional capital markets.
So Alec, I just need to stress something. We're getting a few things on our website, and we're getting some comments that obviously talks to the power of the show and the people that are here. But we are not open for applications as president. People shouldn't think that they can go now and apply. So we have got some people who are sending mails to us with application forms and things now. So we are in the process of introducing the fund, its concept to you, but on our site it clearly says that applications will really only open in the earliest on the 15th of September. They can register who they are and their interest and their emails and their service, and we will put them in the database to invite them to apply when we open.
Oh, put them in your wait. Don't chase people away, Sean.
No, what I mean is they're in the waiting list. I mean, they're there, but they mustn't have an expectation that we have an application process there. We have a waiting list process. We talk to them, we ask them some questions, we gather their detail, and we put it through. You can go to Kisby, yeah.
And it is, we've had a few people saying it's kisby.co.za, not kisby.com,
yes,
which
sorry,
might have been.
Sorry, it was my mistake. Yes, kisby.co.za. Yes, that's 100% correct. Sorry, it was my mistake.
Barrett wants to know, who will be the typical investors into the fund?
So, this is not a fund which has been designed by trying to define the boxes. This is in a fund that has been designed to try and meet an obvious need. I don't know who the investors are going to be. I know who we're targeting, and I don't want to list their names out like this in the public domain. But I think all of the investment capital in South Africa needs to take a portion of its available capital, not only because it's a virtuous thing to do, but because it's an economically resilient thing to do, and take it out of the formal markets and put it into these less established markets which have a much higher growth plan. If I see another building going up in Sandton instead of another business being built in Alexandra, I'll feel ill. Okay, we are sitting here reinvesting in the top of the pyramid, and that is a fundamental flaw which is going to come back, if it does not already come back, to bite us in the bum, if that's not too technical a word for the show. Okay, so let me be clear. We are seeking to invite people back into the real economy. We're not looking for people to circulate money at the top of the current capital pyramid, because we actually don't think it's in their best interest. Okay, good citizenship aside. And so we are going to the classical owners of capital, the classical managers of capital, the institutional capital, the big pension funds, the big storage of capital, the banks, whoever it might be. And we're saying to them, let us invite you into the future, okay? And stop lending money amongst each other, because actually that is creating a division in our society, an economic division in our society, which will fundamentally destroy your established business. So in your own vested interest, for goodness sake, take some of this capital and stop buying traditional shit with it and start buying real growth. So at the risk of getting going here, Alec, you know, we don't have a standard definition of who we're going to go to. We're going to go to everybody who's got a huge balance sheet, and we're saying to them, a piece of this, of your money, needs to go to create the middle economy in our country.
Just as a matter of interest, would you go to private offices as well?
Sure.
Okay. And yes. What would you expect them to be injecting? What would be the minimum?
Well, I'd be surprised if any one investor injects less than 100 million or something. But you know, I don't know. You know, I think we're going to end up with you know, with maybe 2 or 3 anchor investors who go, you know, if you're just raising $1 billion, Mark, we're going to take it all. This is not a big number. I mean, I hate the word billion because most people don't understand it. And, you know, and it'll take you 11,000 days to count to $1 billion, by the way. So, you know, but we're going to go, we're talking about what proportion of investable capital is going to the economic engine of our country. Okay.
Nice.
And if we take that, we're going to have a tiny percentage, which is going to change the prospect of economic dignity for SMEs and economic survival for established business.
Harold Koenig wants to know, will applicants have to be BEE compliant?
We haven't got that in our scorecard at the moment.
Roy Harrington says, will SME require a sound business plan to access the finance?
Yeah, you know, the application process will seek out that business plan. By filling in the application process, you will demonstrate to us your business plan.
Linda Poulter wants to know, is this only for the Eastern Cape?
Alec, can I just add to that? That business plan doesn't need to be a polished PDF document that you need the latest MacBook to do it. We're going to obviously require that you have a plan, but we're expecting the guys who have formulated the plan don't have access to a team of creative designers who put together a 40-page investment memo. So,
the question is this only for the Eastern Cape?
No, it's for the entire country.
No,
whole country.
It's for the entire.
Hazel B. Bill Preston wants to know, would farmers be able to apply?
Sorry, Alec, I think Mark just talked to someone there to fix his microphone. So what did you say?
No problem. Would farmers be able to apply farming with livestock?
Like, there are no hard and fast, and I think that's the thing we need to get clear. What we want to do is create jobs and preserve jobs. And if your business meets those criteria, then please apply.
Chune Stuka wants to know, he says, you just mentioned that you want to assist the typical township trader, but also stated that you won't be willing to subsidize sole traders. Would you expect these sole traders then to register as PTY limited companies?
Well, Alec, it's a degree of size here, right, for us. So we're not set up to be lending effectively to an individual in the term that the individual is governed by the National Credit Act. It's a very different, very different lending approach and a very different set of lending rules. We spoke about equity, we spoke about upside. You know, these are words that we effectively are using. We do need businesses to be established. We have to protect the capital. We need to, when we say a township business, we didn't assume in our mind that every township business is a sole proprietor and a small guy. We're assuming that there are, and we know that there are large businesses in the townships as well.
We can switch your camera back on. It looks like Mark's got his sorted out. Alexia Hajibe says, are there any plans for individual investors in future? I guess at 100 million, it's going to be a pretty small pool, Mark.
So Mark's put himself on mute, which is good. No, sorry.
What I can answer, Alec, on that score, it's quite complex to take money from the public. You know, there's a lot of legislation around that. We would absolutely love to have opened up to the public, because you can then crowdfund this. But it's certainly the direction we will be heading towards. And we're going to be investigating quick, cheap, easy ways for the public to get involved. But we're not there quite yet. Okay, so we're thinking about using...
I'm going to want to overrule Warren's enthusiasm there. We, at this stage, absolutely cannot and will not take money from the public, okay? Because that we would need various different licenses and things. It would be great if in due course, on a fully approved and properly thought through basis, if we could make these investments available to individuals. Can you imagine how exciting that would be? But right now, the answer is absolutely no. Yeah.
But that's what he said. That's exactly what Warren said. Anyway,
I thought he was opening the door there.
It's a very specific point, Alec. You can tell it's a very specific point. We in no way are making an offer to the public.
Again, the PTY, Richard Beer says, does the formality of a PTY buy its formality not preclude 99% of township businesses? Guess you're going to have to apply your mind to that one as well. The Santon Glass Tower Alexander business model probably answers most questions succinctly. Great response. Nice one. Mark is so right about the reinvestment of capital into the top end of the pyramid. How does he see government encouraging this? Nice one there, Robin.
Well, government's got a choice, quite simply. Either we invest in the growth of our people and their economic prospects, or we rescue them when they fail. Now, I was quite involved in the social grant payment system in my time at the post office, and our primary objective there was to take away from the private sector the money they were taking out of that ecosystem, because I regarded social grants as a service, not a business. Which is a service of the state. Now the social grants pay, when last I looked, 200 billion rand a year, ignoring COVID and other stuff. Okay, that is not social development. That's social rescue. Okay, every person employed by an SME that we take out of that social grant system decreases the liability of the state and increases an asset of the state as that person starts paying tax and that entity starts paying tax. And so I would argue that the state has got a huge vested interest in creating employment from a purely monetary income statement point of view. And so I would see them as seriously encouraging this kind of behavior.
Lovely. Well answered on that one. Okay, well, we're pretty much there. Thanks very much for all of the questions that you sent through today. Sorry about a little bit of technical problems. I'm going to ask, just pose one final question to you guys. You said that the applications for borrowings will only be opened by the 15th of September. By that point, presumably, you'll have a very good understanding of how much money is in the fund. You've been talking 5 billion, that kind of number. How confident are you that you'll get to those kind of figures? Maybe each of you can just close off with by answering that question, and then maybe summarizing the message you were giving us. So do you want to start with that, Sean?
Yeah, I think, Alec, our structure doesn't require us to have all the money on a particular day. You can start and you roll this. It's not something which is closed and then starting. You don't want to be sitting with 5 billion on your balance sheet and not having lent 1 cent. So we don't expect to have all of our capital to deploy up front. You deploy it as you grow your base.
Warren, your final comments?
I'm 100% confident we'll raise the money. And if the country and our institutions don't have appetite for this, I'm living in the wrong country and in a parallel universe. So, you know, I'm that confident. We really are thinking outside the box. We see the absolute need, and if we've gotten this wrong, I need to seriously be introspective about what I'm thinking and reading and watching on TV. So if I've gotten this wrong, I'd be very surprised. But yeah, I guess that answers it.
Thanks, Warren. Mark, your final comments?
I fully support what Warren has said, but let me say it further. I think that what we're looking for is such a small piece of the pie. And if you look at the amount of money that's idly circulating at the top of the capital pyramid, and you just take a fraction of that and convince people how it's going to circulate back into their businesses by creating clients, for goodness sake. I think our ambitions are small, and I think this thing has got the propensity to be, 10 times the size that I'm talking at the moment. And I think what's going to happen, like it always does, is we're going to find one or two blobs of capital that are convinced and want to be the lead steers and want to be the anchor tenants. And that's how it always is. And so, Sean alluded to it. Our biggest challenge, I think, is going to be, we don't want to draw a whole bunch of money up front that we can't spend, because then we're going to get the money market rate on that, and that doesn't really work for us. Okay, so we really don't know. I think our ambition is modest, and the need that we're seeking to fill is a huge multiple of this bit of capital that we're starting to raise.
Mark Barnes, Warren Wheatley, Sean Emery, thank you for being with us today on this edition of the Noontime webinar. It's been a real pleasure to be in on the ground floor, if you like, on a very, very exciting project that we'll be following with quite a lot of interest over the next few months. Just to let you know that next week's Noontime webinar is with the 3 founders of First Rand, Laurie Dippenaar, Paul Harris, and GT Ferreira. There's been a few recommendations here that we do a tech check before we come on air. Well, actually, we did do one. We do it for 10 minutes before we come on air. But for some reason, this week, Stu, we just couldn't get it right. I guess the question is, watch out for iPads amongst your panelists in future. Stuart, where are we going to be able to pick up this webinar in a recorded form?
Excellent, thanks, Alec, and thanks to the panelists. We'll put it on the YouTube channel, the Biznews YouTube channel. I'm just going to get that onto this chat quickly now, Alec. And we'll just try to cut out the initial beginning as we can. And then what the team will do, we'll also cut it up into notable audio clips that people on the subject matter that was picked up today as well, Alec, which we'll publish on our owner platform as well. But yeah, that's the process from here.
And as you did see on one of the slides, Biznews is a media partner in this, Kisby. We are very excited about the fund. We think that it's going to be a game changer in South Africa, and we are privileged to be part of the process of exposing it to our community, to the Biznews community. And well, we'll be letting you know as it develops and as it goes forward. But thank you to Mark, Warren, and Sean for giving us this opening day opportunity to share it with you. Thank you also for being with us today. And until the next time, from me, Alec Hogg, and my colleague, Stuart Lohman, look forward to seeing you same place, same time next week. Till then, cheerio.